So I am Amie Burke. I am an employee of Hope, one of the agencies that is putting on the conference today. And so I was honored when they asked me to present about, self-care and sort of doing hard things as a addition to today's conference. And so I am a behavior analyst, and I also have spent about 13 years working with the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network, which is housed out of Hope and Trinity services in the New Lenox area. And so what we do is we provide services for individuals that have a primary diagnosis of intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so about 90% of our referrals every fiscal year also have a co-occurring mental health diagnosis. And it's that sort of challenges our system, right? And so in doing that, we have learned that burnout is real. Our ability to be resilient as clinical staff serving those people in the state of Illinois is challenging. It's a hard job because people aren't making referrals to us when they're having a good day. In fact, it's the exact opposite. And so it is not uncommon for us to be met with direct support professionals that literally have not one drop of water left to give. We're asking them to pour from an empty cup. And so we find ourselves trying to go in and be sunshine on a rainy day, which is very taxing for us as clinical staff too. And in doing that, we've met a lot of middle management, other community behavior analysts that are feeling the exact same way we do. We don't get a lot of big giant wins in the human service field, right? And so how many people are in some sort of human service setting? Okay, a good chunk. How many people are in sort of what I would consider as a behavior analyst that works with adults, more of a traditional sort of ABA type clinic setting? Oh, none. Or you're not raising your hands, I don't know. One of the two. Okay, so most of us are doing that 24/7 sort of work day in and day out. Okay, great. You're my people then. We're going to spend the next hour sort of enjoying each other. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to have some ground rules. And our ground rule is going to be that our goal is to not just be that toxically positive person. I don't want you to leave here thinking that if you're just sunshine and rainbows all day, every day, that your life will be magically better. That in fact is not the case. We're going to continue to do hard things. Finding small joys can also be really, really hard in what we do. So the other thing, I'm also doing a hard thing. I decided for this presentation that I would take Canva for a test run, and it went great. I'm very proud of my slides. It is lovely. However, the way that Canva generalized from my computer sitting by myself to the screen didn't go quite like PowerPoint did. So I'm doing a hard thing. I'm super nervous because I can't see my notes in their entirety on the screen. So yeah, we're gonna see how this goes. So I say all of that because I'm not really sure how to advance this slide because I lost my cursor. So bear with me. There was a reason why I told that story. Okay. So before we start, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this is not a session where I'm going to say at the end of the day, take a bubble bath and your life will be great, right? Now, there's a world in which that can be true in small settings. However, that in and of itself is not going to fix what we're talking about today. We are not here to pretend that the hard parts are not hard. What we're here to do is to develop some simple strategies that we can sort of tuck in our pockets for when things are hard, because they will continue to be hard in what we do every single day, right? Like most of us are probably sitting here with a to-do list a mile long thinking, I could be doing something else rather than being here today. Does anybody have a to-do list that's completely cleared off? Oh, we have one. No, I thought you were I'm like, you're up. Come up here. We all need to learn from you, right? And so we have more work than we can possibly do. In fact, we are never actually probably going to be caught up. We're taking care of human beings that are constantly 2 steps ahead of us in everything that we do day in and day out. So we already do hard things. We're not looking for that to disappear in this process of what we're talking about today. And I have a feeling it might be slow every single time I need to figure out how to change the slide. So you guys are like my guinea pigs. Let's see. Oh, okay. So the challenge that we have is that there is some burnout in the field, right? That is not a personal failure on our part. However, it is very easy to get in the mindset that burnout is a personal failure, right? Because in our mind, what our mind tells us is that if we just would have handled it a different way or would have perceived the information a different way, I am a chronic overthinker by nature. And so if you need the worst case scenario for anything that you could be possibly facing in life, I'm your girl. I can come up with it in 2.2 seconds. In fact, I can give you multiple if you need them, right? And so that's what our mind does to us. We're sort of trained to look at the threats in our environment. And so about 70% of BCBAs report moderate to high burnout. I work with a lot of people that are not behavior analysts. I work with a lot of clinicians, a lot of case managers, a lot of direct support professionals. It feels like that's actually a pretty low number, right? How many people would say they are part of that 70%, that there are days and moments where we're feeling that sort of moderate to high burnout? We're in this cycle of, stress, that we're being asked to do more with less resources. We're sort of overperformers. We're yes people. So guess what? Yes people get more work, right? Because we're going to get the product done. And so it becomes this sort of cycle of stress that we are going through. So about 70% of people report this moderate to high burnout. About 1 in 3 people that are clinical in this field consider leaving the field altogether. I have a side hustle in my mind that I have, and it's watering the flowers at Menards or Lowe's or Home Depot. Right. And so on my hard days, that's where I go in my mind. I'm like, well, today's the day I'm going to apply at Menards. That's it. I'm going to water. And it's so lovely, right? And you can work because it starts at Christmas, and the Christmas display is so nice. And then there's the fall, the mums, and those are no joke to keep alive if you've ever tried to keep mums alive. And so I would really hone that skill and be the best mum waterer that there is. And I could be outside and I could talk to the people, get carts, help people load their cars. Like you would want to come to my store if I was in charge of watering the plants at the supply store. So that's where I sort of go in my mind when I think about leaving the field. Now, then once I'm done with that dream, I put my feet on the ground and I continue to do the hard things. I've yet to apply at my local Menards, but I may at some point. In fact, my coworkers sometimes crack a joke like, oh, is this the day that are we going to Menards today? I'm like, maybe, we may be. The other thing is that most advice about being burned out and how to avoid that doesn't pertain to our field. It pertains to banking and that sort of for-profit world in terms of sales and hiring and firing, right? It's not geared towards what do we need, because the hard isn't going to go away. In fact, a lot of research talks about pushing that hard away. That's not the reality of what we do every single day. So what is it and what is it not? So this is not, when we talk about staying human, we're not talking about pretending that things are fine. We're not talking about suppressing difficult reactions. We're not talking about powering through without refueling. We're not talking about just a weekend of self-care, right? We're talking about staying human in the moments where we're going to acknowledge those really hard things, that this is in front of us, it is not going to go away. Even if I apply at Menards, I still need to get through this. And so it's about developing strategies to sort of help us get through that. The other thing it's about resetting quickly in those moments, because they're going to keep coming. Oftentimes they come in a package deal, right? It's not one thing and then it's like, okay, I have room for another hard thing, bring it on, right? It's sort of a package deal that we get delivered to us of hard things. It's also about protecting our energy in ways that are really sustainable to us. And so when we talk about what it is and what it is not, there's 3 sort of pillars that we're going to address. We're going to talk about resilience, and what that sort of means for us in this field. We're going to talk about regulation, and then we're going to talk about sustainability. Is this where I was going to have you say a little something, Scott? I have my friend Scott sitting up here, and he was listening to me ramble earlier. Okay. So I was practicing this morning, and we were having some great conversations about doing hard things, and so I think everything's better with a buddy. So when we talk about resilience, what we're talking about is our ability as human beings to bounce back. It's not about pretending that those things don't exist. And so when you think about people in your life that are resilient, who comes to mind for you, or in the world? Who's resilient that we sort of know? We'll stand here, I don't care. Me, okay. Yeah, all of us, right? We all do hard things, and yet here we are trying to learn and better ourselves. It's not uncommon for people to say, my grandmother, right? Like she lived through some really hard things. Maybe a friend that is fighting the good fight health-wise. Those are resilient people. The individuals that we serve, oftentimes, if you're working with adults, I have adults that have a pretty significant trauma history, right? They're pretty resilient and tend to find joy in a lot of things. And so Oprah Winfrey comes to mind for me, right? If you know her story, she was born into poverty, had a kid at a young age. However, she didn't give up. She went on to become one of the most well-known women in talk show history, right? And so she's resilient. She sort of pushed through. It's not that those hard things didn't happen. It's that she had that sort of elasticity to not sort of give up. So as we go through this, we're going to talk about resilience and building resilience in us. The other thing we're going to talk about is regulation. And when I think about regulation, we sort of all are under the same understanding that we're working with people that have really challenging behaviors or situations that they're dealing with. I'm talking about that co-regulation piece, right? Like we can't regulate the people we work with. We can't be the best version of ourselves for them if we ourselves are not regulated. And so we need to have ways to sort of ground ourselves in those moments. And so really resetting after the tough moments without sort of losing our focus and what's underneath of us. And then sustainability. It's easy to say, you know what, I had an exceptionally challenging day. So maybe I am going to go home and take a bubble bath. Or my friend Laurel up here does Legos. Lego flowers. And so we all have those sort of things that we can dive into on particularly hard days that ground us. However, I'm talking about everyday hard days. Those things are going to keep coming. Staff calling off, individuals, having a challenging behavior. If you supervise staff, maybe they did something that you need to deal with, right? Like that's a whole nother level of stress if you're a leader for people. So that's sort of when we talk about our takeaways at the end of the day, we're going to come back to this slide. And so we're going to talk about takeaways that are really rooted in our ability to be resilient, our ability to regulate ourselves, and then a sustainability piece. So we don't want things that we can't really sustain. We don't want something where it's sort of one and done, because what we want to do is teach and train ourselves to embrace this idea that we can sort of stay human by doing hard things, stay true to ourselves. Okay, so what sounds great, sounds easy, right? What gets in the way of that? Are these that sort of real barriers? Are these things that sort of resonate with you? Does anybody have a caseload that seems fairly reasonable? Or would most people say that it's entirely too big to manage? Most people would say it's entirely too big to manage. That we feel selfish if we do something for self-care. How many people maybe wanted to take off a particular day, however a meeting came up, so you're like, well, I'll just hop on that one meeting, or I'll just do that one thing, right? Because it feels selfish if we don't give every last ounce that we have to what we're doing, because we're human beings doing hard things, so we got to sort of push through it, right? And as a Gen X kid, I get it, right? Like, that's what we do. You suck it up, buttercup. I was raised on neglect and hose water and wear that like a badge of honor, right? That is no joke. Waiting. You're waiting for that better season that sort of never comes. That if we get through this one hard thing, then it will be okay. So are those real barriers? Are those thoughts in reality for sort of what we're all feeling? But what do they cost us? In fact, it costs us to sort of burn ourselves out faster, right? Because could that meeting have happened without you had you not hopped on it? Always, right? But we feel like it can't. Like, what if somebody makes a decision that we don't agree with in that meeting? Then what? Right? So we cost ourselves. We ourselves come into work sort of dysregulated. How many people work with people that can be dysregulated at times? And it's like, well, whoa, right? And so we ourselves can become dysregulated. We make decision-making harder. It is harder to make decisions when we're not sort of rooted in regulation. And it can cost us this ability to sort of lose people to my dream job of watering plants at Menards, right? People aren't going to stay if we can't sort of figure out how to regulate ourselves. I think this is where we were talking about it. When Scott and I were talking this morning, he mentioned that this sort of resonates with him with the happiness trap. How many people are familiar with that book? Yeah. What was your comments about that? The next one? This one? Yeah. Okay. So this sort of goes into that, the difference between happiness and meaning. And so meaning, why don't you explain what you were saying, I think?
Well, what Amie and I were talking about and what the slide is kind of discussing is that trap that we get into is believing that happiness is this positive, happy thing that we have to to attain, and it's always going to be smiles and all these wonderful things, when in reality, more often than not, the thing that truly makes us happy is doing the things that matter most to us, living by our values, and doing things that give us a sense of meaning. So even if you may not have a smile on your face while doing something very meaningful for you all day long, at least that's still meaningful to you, right? And so is that true happiness versus everybody else saying, oh, you got a smile on your face today, so you must be in a good mood, right? And so meaning versus happiness is, I think, what we were talking about.
Yeah, I think that sort of resonated with me when Scott was talking about, thank you, Scott, when he was talking about it this morning, because I think most of us would agree that we chose this field because of the meaning, right? I don't think we chose this field because I'm super happy every day to be, wishing I worked at Menards, right? And so we chose it because of that meaning. We chose it because of the high impact. How many people interview people, and it's like, tell me why you want to be in this field. I love helping people. It's like, what does that mean? And it's that meaning piece that sort of gets into it. So, but the meaning piece alone is not enough to sustain us, right? The meaning alone of the job, you're right, this job is very meaningful. Everybody in here, by you raising your hands, tells us that we're doing things that are really, really meaningful. That alone is not enough to sustain us if we can't figure out the happiness sort of piece that goes along with it. So let's get into that. We started a little late, so I want to watch my time here. Lost my cursor again. Okay. So there's this common belief. There's this common belief that happiness is a choice. And so when I was doing research about happiness for this presentation and sort of what that means, so we're going to couple that meaning with finding joy for ourselves, there was a lot of quotes about being happy, right? And this was one of them. Happiness is a choice, not a result. Nothing will make you happy until you choose to be happy. No person will make you happy unless you decide to be happy. Your happiness will not come to you. It will only come from you. And I think that's true to a certain extent, right? However, it needs to be more. How many people can say to themselves on a really, really bad day, just be happy? No, that doesn't work, right? It's like when you're at a 10 and somebody tells you need to calm down. That typically, yeah, actually I go to 60. Like, guess what? Now I'm throat punching. She said it, not me. She's up here like that one. So I think this is a common belief, and maybe it's true to a certain extent. However, we also have to put in the work to sort of switch our thinking a little bit. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit more now. What happened? Oh, it just goes up. So I think that for a lot of years, we're working people. We're a helping profession, right? We're not in a banking sort of sales-driven force. And so for a lot of years, I think that our profession got by thinking that success comes first and happiness comes later, right? And so if we're successful, then we can be happy. And so in positive psychology, what we're doing is we're going to flip that idea a little bit. That if we sort of challenge things head on with this idea that we can be happy and that can help drive our success. And so that's sort of what I want to use as the framework for the rest of this presentation. And so I think when we talk about this, if we can sort of engage in and have these experiences that improve our, positive sort of emotional state, we're more likely to be creative. We have better problem solving. We have more flexibility when stress sort of comes at us, because stress is going to come at us. There's not a magic world in which that's just going to not exist. And then it gives us that persistence and that resilience that we were talking about earlier. And so the other thing that goes along with this, and this is one of the tools that we're going to put in our toolbox later, is that social connection and support really is going to be the single greatest tool to combat that burnout piece. And so I think if COVID 6 years later taught us anything, it was about the power of relationships. And like I said, we're going to come back to this. And so while maybe there was some good things that came out of COVID, right? Like I worked at an organization where we shared a Zoom account before COVID. Now we all have our own, right? And so there's this idea that we made things a little bit easier. We don't have to drive everywhere for every single meeting. However, what we did take away was some of that social connection piece. And so at ICPN, we're starting to see people get back together for some of those meetings and face-to-face. And we can do much better work when we're with each other face-to-face. So we're going to come back to that idea a little bit later. So this is that idea of resilience. And so when we talk about being resilient, you have to have sort of a growth mindset. And so when you think about a threat mindset versus sort of a challenge mindset, it's the same sort of thing. And so the difference is if you have that fixed sort of threat mindset, you tend to be reactive. You're faced with situations and stress and you get to be defensive, that it's my way or there is no way around it. I'm the only person that can sort of drive this train, right? I have to be there because it's my way or it's wrong. We have a very narrow focus. We're not in a situation where we can really learn from our mistakes. Our patience gets shorter. How many people, when their stress level rises, their fuse gets a lot shorter? My husband would say that's very true for me, right? Are you saying that's true? No. And we sort of start scanning for threats, right? We start looking for threats, and then we're exhausted. There are days where I go home and maybe my poor husband had a bad day at work, but I don't have not 1 ounce to listen to his problems, right? We're human beings, and so we spend a lot of time listening to what's wrong in the world, and it's like, say something nice, Like, I'm sorry that the gas station didn't light up when you know, hit go on the, he builds gas stations for a living, and so oftentimes I'm like, oh wow, okay, yep. I'm sorry that the tank floated because we got too much rain. That sounds terrible, you know? As opposed to this growth mindset. And so think about people you work with that maybe go into situations that have a fixed mindset. I know we work with all agencies in the state of Illinois. And so there are agencies that we work at that are have a very growth mindset. And then there's people that we go in and we're meeting with you guys and that will never work. But what if, right? So we all work with people that sort of fall into one bucket or another. And the people that have that sort of fixed threat mindset, they can take from our cup, right? It's like, no, but we got to try something different. Because if we keep applying the same strategies to the same problem, we're not going to get anything different. And so that's that growth mindset. We want people to be curious. We want our teams to be curious. You want to approach situations with flexibility. And so it doesn't have to be your way for things to be right. So if the end result is 9, does it matter how we get there? Maybe I'm going to say 5 plus 4, and Scott's going to say
6 plus 9.
He's wrong. But there's a lot of different ways to get there, right? Some people may say 3 plus 3 plus 3. And so it doesn't matter. And so it doesn't have to be our way. It allows for more creative thinking, curiosity, better regulation. There is a ton of research that supports people with a growth mindset have the ability to solve problems at a much more high-level capacity than people that have that fixed sort of mindset. And it gives us that sustainable energy that we were talking about when we were talking about resilience, regulation, and sustainability. And so one way to sort of embrace the ability that we need to be sustainable is to embrace that growth mindset, that it does not have to be your way for it to be right. You do not have to attend every single meeting for your agency to sort of function without you, right? If you are the person where you have to be present for everything, you're going to burn yourself out, right? Things need to be able to function without that one single person present at all time. Okay. Boy. This I will likely never present in Canva again because of this one experience. So the big sort of, Scott talked about the happiness trap earlier, but a lot of my sort of passion around the idea of happiness came from this book, The Happiness Advantage. And there's a great TED Talk on it. There is an audio book that is like 99 cents on Amazon if you're an audiobook person. He's kind of a funny dude, so it's easy to listen to. I will say this, and maybe I should be embarrassed to say it, I'm not a reader, I'm not a book person. Once I got done with my master's degree, I vowed to never read another book again. So I found it enjoyable, and it's something that works. And so the premise of this is that his thought process is that happiness is not the belief that everything is perfect. It's the belief that change is possible. And so what he did was he studied happiness at Harvard University. And he's produced a ton of research about what we need to sort of sustain happiness and what that really means, right? And the difference between meaning and happiness. And so we're going to touch on a little bit of it today. We're not going to take like a huge deep dive by any means. And so the formula, he's saying, is that we've been using it backwards. And we touched on this a little bit earlier. And so the old formula was that we work hard, success comes, and then we're allowed to be happy. And for most of us, that probably never comes, right? You got a promotion, you're in the job of your dreams, but do you find yourself happy? No, because why? That stress is continuing to happen. Problems continue to exist. Hard work keeps showing up. And so what we want to do is sort of embrace this idea that there's an advantage. There's a happiness advantage. that if we have positivity and have a better brain that has that resiliency component to it, that we're going to find more success. Could everybody get behind this sort of idea as being something that's possible? I myself sort of got in this mindset that I needed to always chase the next big thing, right? Once I get through this one project, once my to-do list is perfectly color-coded and all of my documentation is done, then I can be happy. Oh, but my car wasn't clean, so then I got to get my car cleaned on the way home. But my floors weren't mopped, so now I need to get my floors mopped, and then I can be happy, right? It's a vicious cycle of where does it end? And so there's this idea that it's okay to be happy in times where things aren't perfect. It's okay to be happy while we're doing hard things. In fact, the hard things won't be as hard if we can find a little bit of joy and happiness in our lives. So his research indicated that people that had this sort of happiness advantage mindset were 31% more productive when they had a positive brain state. That there was 3 times more problem solving under positive conditions, right? And that there were reported to be 23% fewer fatigue systems in a positive versus neutral. Not even negative, just neutral. And so a quarter more if you were positive versus just neutral. And to me, most days neutral, I'm winning. Like I'm doing good if I'm neutral, as long as I don't dip below that into negativity. And so that was interesting to me, is that neutral sometimes isn't good enough, because then we're sort of just at status quo and never really tapping into that, the advantage of being happy. So again, I think a critical clarification is that we are not pretending that hard things aren't hard. We're not doing that at all. In fact, what we are doing is we want to cultivate small things that we can sort of win at. And that's what I really want to sort of spend the rest of the time talking about today, is that we want to have these genuine, intentional sort of moments that we practice every single day that can prime our brain to handle the hard things, because the hard things will happen, right? I will stupidly choose to do something like present the first time at a conference with a software that I've never done before. That will happen. I know myself well enough to know. I'm telling you all it won't, it will happen. Like, fast forward, check in with me next year, I will have done something equally as stupid that's caused me stress. Okay? So in the happiness advantage, there's 7 principles. And so Sean says that there's the happiness advantage, that positivity primes our brain for peak performance, right? That we're able to sort of get through the hard things quicker if we have this advantage sort of tucked in our pocket. The other thing is is it called the fulcrum and the lever? And so the fulcrum is the thing that sort of drives your lever, right? Like, this is a terrible example, but here I go. I think of like the toilet handle thing, right? Like that, the fulcrum is the thing on the inside that sort of drives the lever. And so the mindset is that. And so the same workload feels entirely different depending on how we frame our meeting, or the meaning behind it. And so my example of this is, like I said, I work with HOPE, but the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network. And so it is not uncommon for us to get stuck in negativity, right? Like, we get frustrated. We go out, we're dealing with challenging people, and we're met with resistance that nothing is going to work. And it's like, well, you're right, nothing is, with this sort of mindset. And so it is not uncommon for us to sort of challenge each other. And we have to shift our own mindset in order to help other people. And so one of the things that we sort of work on is like being graceful with people when maybe we don't want to, and being graceful with ourselves. And so we talk a lot about like grounding ourselves and putting our feet on the ground and making sure that we're going into it with this understanding that the people that we're providing services to are doing the best job that they can with the resources that they have. That they probably didn't put their feet on the ground today trying to annoy me, right? Or screwing it up, or having an individual elope because they turned their back on them. And so they did the best job that they could, the majority of the time. There's always bad apples in everything. But if we go into it with the idea and the mindset that people are doing around us are doing the best job that they can with the resources that they have, we are able to provide a better service collectively than if we sort of went into it with a negative mindset. Now, there are times where one particular agency sort of challenges that thought process, or one particular staff at an agency, or one direct support professional can really sort of challenge our ability to see big picture. But we really sort of then lean into each other, and it's like, okay, table that, and let's come back to it. And so that mindset, if we didn't have that sort of positivity and the ability to see big picture, we would really be dead in the water. The other thing is this tetra effect, and I think we're going to talk about that one in a second on the next slide. So his fourth one is falling up, and so that post-traumatic growth is real, right? We're going to do hard things, but can we learn from it on the other side? And so it's not this idea that we just have to get through it and then it will be over. And so it's the idea that when you know better, you can do better. And so we can take those hard experiences and apply some of this sort of things to it, right? That we can sort of change our mindset as we face those hard things. And so maybe we look at things with a different mindset. Do we need to change our policy? If we're frustrated with a direct support professional, have we trained them appropriately? Do they have the resources they need to be successful? Or are we just going to keep allowing the same individual to elope without doing anything different? And so the other thing is the Zorro circle. And so the idea with this is that when we become overwhelmed, our ability to see positivity gets smaller and smaller, right? And so without training our brain to sort of see positivity in these moments, when we become overwhelmed, we lose that. And as a behavior analyst, I always think about that. I'm not wanting to teach individuals to use coping skills when they're sort of at a 10, or if when they're in the red, right? I want to teach them when they're green. And so when they are in red, they know how to use them. And so we ourselves need to do the same thing. We should not wait until we're overwhelmed and stressed out to practice these sorts of things. We need to apply the same things that we're using for the folks that we're working with. And so small wins. And so that Zorro circle really focuses on much smaller sorts of wins that we can focus on. And so small wins really restores this idea of control. It doesn't have to be this big elaborate thing, right? How many people have to, when your direct support professionals call in, you have to find coverage for them, right? And you finally make that one phone call and the staff's like, yeah, I'll do it. What a win, right? And so you're sort of riding that high. Those are small wins. It doesn't have to be this grandiose sort of large thing that you're fully staffed and your staff are greatly trained and they're never going to make another mistake for you to sort of find happiness in your job. Because I'm going to fast forward to the end, that's not going to happen, right? The other thing is this 20-second rule, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later too. And so if you make a healthy choice towards the path of least resistance, then it's much easier in those small sort of things. It doesn't have to be this long sort of drawn out process. You don't have to spend hours and hours every day sort of training your brain. And so we're going to have a slide on that. Then the number 7 is that social investment piece. And so the 3 that we're going to talk a little bit more about are the Tetris effect, that social investment piece, and so the power of relationships, and then that 20-second rule. So the Tetris effect says that if our brain gets better at noticing sort of what it practices, then we have the ability to change it. And so if I were to ask you guys to look around the room, and I want you to notice everything that's red, every single thing. Like I would say the chair, what else do we have that's red in here? Amanda's shirt is orangey, I'm going to let it be red. The fire extinguisher, the exit sign. Oh, we have a headband, okay. We got the throat puncher with the headband. Right? And how many people know, we're looking around the room, I know what red is, and so it's easy to find that. It's easy to see the red in the environment. All of the chairs, they're red, right? There's red, there's red, there's red. There's going to be somebody in here that says that's not red, right? That's maroon. You were going to do it, weren't you?
I was like, technically.
Now, stop and look around. Find the blue. I see my friend Emily has a blue shirt on. Well, this is like blue row right up here. Laurel's got blue on. Scott's wearing black, I'm just saying. My water bottle, I'll take a drink. What else is blue? Jeans. Anything else? The walls, are they blue, or are you going to say they're gray? Probably, huh?
Like slate gray.
They're slate gray. Okay. We're not arguing with her. So how easy was it for you to switch from red to blue? Pretty easy, right? So it's not that easy to switch from finding the positive. However, it is possible, because over the course of time, we've learned that you can sort of just look at things differently in the environment. And so that's sort of the Tetris effect. So what happened when Tetris sort of first came out is that over the course of time, while people were playing the game Tetris, I think some people probably play like Candy Crush now, or like Blockbuster. You do?
No, I played Tetris.
He played Tetris. And so over the course of time, were you able to figure out the sort of patterns of it coming down and where that would fit into and what you needed to do to clear the row, right? That's sort of the Tetris effect. That as people continued to play Tetris, they were able to figure out the patterns of the game. And so the Tetris effects with the happiness advantage is that the more you sort of force yourself to look at the positive in the environment, the easier it is to sort of do it every single day. And the more it becomes habit. And so it may be little reminders for you, right? Like spark joy, find joyful things in your life. Like find something positive. Start every meeting with tell me one thing that's going well instead of focusing on the negative. We often start those meetings that you had to be present for on that Friday and talking about what's going wrong, right? Switch it and talk about what's going right. One of the things that we recommend a lot is shifting the thought process of our direct support professionals. And so it's not uncommon for them to have logs where they document every single thing that happened in a day. And they love to tattle on the individuals that live there, right? And so, but ending it with, now tell me something that went well on your shift. And so that shift alone allows them to leave feeling positive. And so that's an easy sort of takeaway, right? That you can train your brain by maybe even forcing it in there in the beginning. Focus on something positive that's happening. Start your team meetings with, tell me what's going right. And maybe instead of tell me what's going wrong, tell me what's keeping you up at night. What does that look like? You know, and then it allows you opportunity to sort of work through it and apply some strategies to it. When we train our brains, what the research showed is that we have the ability that we can then notice progress. We can notice little things that are going well. If we just sort of, in the beginning, you are going to have to force it a little bit, right? And you're going to feel pretty hokey. But I think over the course of time, it becomes so much easier. I know at Hope, that's one of the things that we've really started working on, like when we have our one-to-one meetings. It's like, tell me what's going right. I think our CEO started doing that in some of his meetings. Like, go around the room, like, you bring me all the problems, tell me something that's going right. And it really sort of, over the course of time, one, you start to prepare for it ahead of time. So then you start to notice it, like, oh, this would be an easy thing to tell him in the meeting. Like, look it went right. And so because you want to be prepared. And so in the beginning, it might seem a little forced, but it becomes sort of second nature because you want to find things to do your job right. And so then you almost end up with all of these great things that people are doing that you can sort of report on, right? And it becomes a lot easier than, employee shout outs. Those are hard to maintain. They sort of get pushed to the bottom of the list, right? But if you focus on the positive things in the environment every single day, it allows you to notice people's effort, have a little bit of fun in your environment. It allows you to have that connection piece. That it improves that resilience, and then over the course of time, I think we find ourselves sort of being more successful. And a lot of people in this field sort of define success in terms of that happiness. That social connection piece. So we are sort of trained to hold space for other people, right? And so there is this idea in the power of relationships. And so his book is based on positive psychology. We're not going to go into that, but one of the PERMA model is relationships. And so the power of relationships, like I said, became abundantly clear during COVID, that we as human need that connection. In fact, it is the leading thing that people need to sort of define success and happiness, is that connection piece. And so all of us work with other people. When you think about your social circles, how many social circles do we all have that we can sort of lean into? And what does that look like when you're sort of removed from them, right? Sometimes my coworkers, and they're here in the front couple of rows, they can overwhelm me, right? I don't see them every single day, so when I do, I sometimes like, that's a lot of words. Looking at you. I'm just kidding. And so we do a lot of talking. But that's not what I'm talking about, because there are times at the end of the day where it's like, I just need a little bit of silence, right? Like, I'm sort of on human overload because I've had so much connection. What we're talking about is meaningful sort of connection with people. And so church groups, friends, I go to the gym where I have a great group of people that I start my day with. Those are people that I value that connection. And so I actually had to have a minor surgery where I had to not go to the gym. I ended up going because those are my people. That's who I like to start my day with. And so I drank coffee and pretended I coached. They loved it. But that social connection piece is very important to me. And so what happened was, at first I was like, oh, this is great. I don't have to go to the gym at 5. In fact, my doctor said I can't do it, so I'm not going to. However, it had a very lasting impact on how I was able to sort of navigate the rest of my day, because that social connection piece is very, very important. When I don't see my parents for a long period of time, that sort of wears on me, right? I'm here for a couple of days, so I miss my husband, and you wouldn't know that I miss my husband, but I do miss him, and my daughter, right? Like, they're people. But the people I don't get to see every day are pouring into my cup. So I'm going to leave here with my cup a little full from them. So what sorts of things do you guys have, like how you get your social connection? What does that look like? What sorts of activities do you do that fills your social connection? Your power of relationships? You waitress? You'd be a great waitress. That's awesome. Okay. And you like talking to the customer?
I do, because it's my family's restaurant, and there's like history and stuff like that. So it kind of fills up my cup because,
You got regulars that come? Yeah, that's awesome. What else? That's a great example. Yeah. Love that. So does that I'm going to ask you a question about that, because does that turn into sort of like a complaint fest, or do you have sort of no? I love that. I love that. That's awesome. I'm coming. When do we have it? Laurel and I were just talking about that. Like, our sarcasm is often misinterpreted at times. What else? Does anybody do church, like spiritual things? Yeah, that's a sort of, you root yourself in that sort of community, right? The people we work with every day, like love them or lump them, they're our people, right? Like we're all here sort of for that meaning piece. We all are here for the same sort of reason. What sorts of things do you do, Scott? You play in a band? Okay. So the interesting thing about this is that we talked about these sort of big connections, right? Like going to church, your lunch bunch, but you got a meal prep to do that. So what the research actually shows is that 60-second micro connections can have a lasting impact on your happiness. And so it doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out sort of engagement for it to have some sort of meaningful impact on you. And so at Hope, one of the things we do is we have Craig is here, so I hope I don't get this wrong. We have a 5-10 rule. And so we have it plastered everywhere. And so what it means is that if I'm within 5 feet of you, I need to speak to you. I need to at least say, good morning, how are you today? If I'm 10 feet away, I still do it, but it's hog calling at a certain point, right? But you're supposed to acknowledge the person. And what it does is it stops us from sort of just going into each other's environments, and then you're left with wondering, what just happened there? Like, are they mad at me? Are they? And so now it's sort of like clockwork. And so Hope is unique in that we have a lot of different buildings in a lot of different states. We're sort of nationwide, and we do a wide variety of things. But we took a tour of some of the facilities yesterday, and there was not one person that walked by us that didn't greet us or wave at us, right? And so at first it was a little bit forced. You know, it was like, put the posters up, we're gonna check to make sure the posters are up. And then it was like, good morning. I'm within 5 feet, I'm saying hi to you. And it was sort of a joke, right? But that wore off pretty quickly, and now I think we've gathered that I would just hog call when I walk in anyway, but if there's, some respect that, you can just like wave or acknowledge somebody. Because I think we've all been in situations where somebody comes into your workspace, or even an interaction at a store or a waitress that, like I one time was checking out at Walgreens, and I'm like, I think I'm going to actually pay for my prescriptions and other things without actually speaking to this cashier at all. Like, how crazy is that? And so it's sort of, if you live your life by this idea that even micro sort of interactions can have a lasting impact on our overall level of happiness. And sometimes we get that. I put the picture of the Zoom up there because sometimes that is the reality of it, right? That our interactions, while it's best face-to-face, and I think that is what sort of fills our cup as people in a human service field, we can still sort of get those micro interactions by greeting people when we first get on a Zoom call or something of the sort. Did we go forward? So there's common traps to this, though. And so we covered sort of the framework of PERMA. Scott talked a little bit about ACT with the happiness trap, and then the happiness advantage. However, there's also traps to this, right? And so there's easy things to sort of misapply in what we do every day. And so what those look like is that there can be a real difference between noticing what happened and replaying it, right? And so I told you that I can get stuck in worst case scenario. And so I've been pretty honest with the people in my circle that have to deal with me every day. And it's like, I'm sort of stuck right now. In fact, it happened this morning with the presentation, and Laurel's like, don't do it. Don't do it. You're going there. Don't do it. Move past it. It'll be fine. It's an hour. It's about hard things. You can do hard things for 1 hour, right? But in my mind, it was going to be awful, and all of these horrible things were going to occur. And so there is this idea that we can focus on what's going to go wrong in that sort of fixed threat mindset. We can get stuck there. And then we sort of ruminate in this cycle of chronic negativity. The other thing we can do is we can have this idea that we can have this toxic positivity. And so then it becomes almost offensive, right? And I think there's a difference between that one person that we work with where it's like, good grief, what did you eat this morning? You know? It's like you're always happy, and this sort of toxic positivity that almost then starts to come across as like a little passive aggressive. The other thing is this idea that social investment can drain you instead of restoring you. And so what I'm not suggesting is that you stay at a church that doesn't fill your cup just because it's a social connection. It is okay to remove yourself from situations that don't quite do it for you, right? If you are not part of the problem and you can't find anything positive with it, you don't need to stay and sort of deplete yourself. You don't need to stay in relationships that are sort of not doing for you what they should be doing. So absorbing a colleague's load is not the same as connection. And so always doing their work because they're not doing it, that's not connection. If your lunch group became one person was always doing the meal prep, right? There might be one. No, I'm just kidding. You would start to feel like you were taken advantage of, right? And so that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm talking about genuine sort of connections that pour into you, that are meaningful for you. Let's see. I want to make sure I covered everything that was important there. The next thing, that I want to talk about is your why. And so without all of this framework, if we don't have a set of values that sort of drives us, then we don't have anywhere to go, right? We don't have anything to sort of relate any of these sort of things back to, because things are going to continue to be hard. Hard things are going to continue to show up in our lives. However, if we don't have that anchor, then we don't have anything to sort of go back to, right? And so why does this work matter to me? And so it's important that when we make contact with to understand that when we make contact with our values during difficult moments, that we're not bystanding the situation, we're actually just giving it meaning, right? We want to label what it is that's happening. And so over the course of time, it allows us to root things back to what's valuable and meaningful to us, right? All of us we sort of established that we all work in environments where things that are valuable and meaningful to the people that we work with. In fact, as a behavior analyst, that's what I'm using. Those are the tools in my toolbox. What reinforcement do I have that Scott will work for, right? And so, because I'm trying to change behavior over the course of time. And so, it's the same thing for us. We want to tie things back to our why. And so, let's go on to the next thing here. So when we talk about identifying our values, and sometimes we have personal values. At Hope, we have a set of core values that we sort of live in accordance with. One of them is being resilient, a team player, compassionate. Growth is important to us, doing things with purpose. And so your organization may have core values that often drives your mission. However, you yourself should also have values. And so it allows you to sort of go back to your why. And so when you identify your values, think of a moment that this work felt right, that you were doing something, and what did it protect or support? What did that moment look like? If you need help in identifying your values. And there's a ton of sort of activities on the internet that you can use that give you laundry lists of values that you sort of work within, right? But living in accordance with your why really isn't this new idea. So if you could guarantee one outcome for the people that you serve, what would it be? Maybe it's that they're happy. Maybe it's that they live a life that's fulfilled and meaningful. And so what would you keep showing up for even on the hardest day? And what does doing good work mean to you? And then this is the one that sort of resonates with me. If somebody saw me doing my best, the best that I have in a situation, what would that look like, right? And it may not look like it's the best to somebody else because sometimes we have to do hard things. And so maybe I would probably be having fun. And that's a core value of mine. I like to use humor, have a little bit of joy in my life. But I also pride myself on being graceful because I need grace from other people as well. What sorts of values do other people have that make sense to them, that they sort of root themselves in if you have identified any? Do you have any, Scott? Scott's like, I'm never coming to her presentation again.
Sorry, I was still thinking about the slide, so I missed the question.
What are some of your values?
I think one of the biggest ones is, for me, is helping people and educating people on things they may not understand to help keep people safe. That's a big one. Educating to keep people safe.
So being a teacher? Yeah, oftentimes our values are rooted in our ers, right? Like at our conference, we had a presenter and he talked about your ers, right? Like, are you a mother? Are you a baker? Are you a father? Your sort of ers can often define how you are rooted in your values as well. So looking at this through an ABA-formed lens, it often works when we apply the same science to our own well-being. And so my brain tracks what gets reinforced, right? I know what my supervisor finds valuable and meaningful. And so we talked about how, you know, it is an expectation that I come armed with some positivity when I go to a meeting. And so now I'm at the point where I'm sort of scanning for those things. I'm looking for those. And so over the course of time, it has become easier to sort of do that. But in the beginning, that sort of behavior got reinforced, right? And so I got great feedback, which is important to me in terms of that. The extinction of self-care. And so when we do self-care and it goes unreinforced, so we take a bath, right? And we go to work the next day and it still sucked, right? Stress was still there. And so what you want to do over the course of time is start finding things to sort of pair that self-care to. And so when you're there, root yourself. You know, you guys talked about for your 1 hour for your lunch, we don't talk about work. We try to focus on things and get to know each other as human beings, right? So they're throwing a ton of sort of different strategies into one session. How often do you do it? A week, month? Every day. I love that. Where do you guys work? That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Do you guys miss each other over the summer? She said, I miss them. That's amazing. Okay. So the other thing we want to do is focus on those little sort of takeaways that we talked about. And so I'm going to go through the next couple of slides because we started late. I know lunch is coming, so we're going to try to end on time. That here's sort of little micro things that the happiness advantage sort of suggests. So if you can sort of focus on 3 good things that happened today, again, it trains that Tetris effect that we talk about. And so we talked about starting your meeting with positivity, getting the people you work with, like, I will listen to you complain, but give me a solution to the problem, right? Or tell me one good thing. Like, maybe we don't have a solution, but tell me one thing positive before you leave my office that we can focus on. The other thing we can do is positive journaling. So writing something that's specific or meaningful from the day. And so I don't know if anybody else's Instagram algorithm is like, there's gratitude journals, right? And so focusing on things that you're grateful for. an act of kindness. And so an act of kindness doesn't have to be this grandiose paying for somebody's Starbucks in front of you. It really can be holding the door open for somebody that was struggling, or taking the shopping cart back for somebody that was going to have to walk it all the way back inside. And so an act of kindness also fills our cup. We're all here because of that meaning. And so that meaning piece is something that is valuable to all of us. We're in the helping profession because of that meaning piece. And so those act of kindness pours into us. They don't actually take from us, right? If you're doing things that are cup filling. Now, carrying your coworker's load, that's not an act of kindness. That's not what I'm talking about. Meditation and stillness. And so there's research to suggest that even 2 minutes of stillness reduces stress and restores your function overall. And so you can use sort of that 20-second block that we talked about, block it out on your calendar, or start your meeting with a couple of moments of silence. It becomes a very powerful thing. Now, in the beginning, when I did this, I would think like, okay, I got to be quiet for 120, 119, 180, right? And so you start like thinking. And so as you sort of start to practice meditation over the course of time, that 2 minutes really sort of tends to fly by. Exercise. There is no shortage of research and data to indicate that exercise is one of the most powerful things that we can do to live a better, more fulfilled life. And so a 10-minute walk, biking, being outside, those sorts of things. I get it, but you got to sort of find your thing. And there's, find what works for your body, Maybe it's snowboarding or whatever that is. There's no real way around the benefits of getting exercise in almost every single day. And then being grateful. And so I'm not talking about grateful for I'm grateful there's not a tornado today. I'm talking about being grateful for something specific. Like, I'm grateful that Laurel and Scott were here when I was perseverating about my computer blowing up earlier, right? Because they sort of grounded me, got me through it. We are at the end of this and nothing horrible happened, right? But in that moment, so I'm grateful for that. So thank you guys. And so really being specific with your gratitude. Research says that the more specific you can be in terms of what you're grateful for allows you to tie it into other areas of your life. Protecting your daily energy. And so having functional boundaries. And so like I said, we talked about that meeting can occur without you, right? People can make decisions that maybe you feel like you have to make. Allow people, have that growth sort of mindset. Have this idea that between sort of tasks, you have that restructure that I'm going to show you on the next slide. Journal. And then really engage in that social investment. Find your people in life and find those micro 60-second sort of connections with people that will sort of pour back into your cup. So here's a simple sort of reset protocol. Pause it and rename it. And so that was hard. That can be enough, right? Like, that sucked. Do 3 deep breaths. Sometimes even one, it's like, okay, we can do this. And then have a touch point. What was I trying to do? How can I shift? How can I get through this hard moment? And then focus on one thing that went well and sort of train your brain over the course of time. And so it's really not feeling better immediately. In fact, a lot of times we won't feel better immediately. Like, sometimes I have to get through worst case scenario before I can get to the point of feeling better. It's about building that sort of resilience over time. So when we talked about resilience, the one thing that really comes into play is having that growth mindset and having that idea that you can sort of train your brain over the course of time to bounce back quicker by focusing on things that are positive. having that regulation piece. And so being able to sort of put your feet on the ground and reset when things are hard for you. And then really engaging and pouring into yourself with those social sort of connections or your why to really sustain this idea that we can do hard things. And so the goal really isn't to become unaffected by hard things at all. The goal is to learn how to really stay human while we continue to do them. So as a small act of kindness for 3 people, I actually have a copy of the book. Only 3 though. So if anybody would read this, I would be happy for you to have a copy of the book. Come grab it. I will buy you guys your own. Don't take my book. All right. I think we can all agree that the throat puncher may need a book. You bet. Yep. So thank you guys